Hi, very good morning. I'm Dr. Janak Patel, MD General Physician. Today we'll be talking on one of the another interesting topic which is part of respiratory system as well as part of cardiovascular system we call as a pulmonary hypertension. You know very well hypertension means increase in the blood pressure, and if there is an elevation of pulmonary arterial pressure we call as a pulmonary arterial hypertension, and if there is an increase in pulmonary vein pressure we call pulmonary venous hypertension. So those are the different terms which will be utilized. We will be having other terminology also. So because of increase in the pulmonary pressure, either because of venous pressure or because of arterial pressure, pulmonary hypertension will develop, and secondary to pulmonary hypertension you will have an increase afterload on right ventricle which will end up with right ventricular hypertrophy, and then finally it will end into congestive cardiac failure. We'll use the word cor pulmonale. So, or pure right ventricular failure. So, left ventricular failure can end with congestive cardiac failure, then we call it a congestive heart failure. But if pulmonary hypertension without left ventricular failure, that in absence of pulmonary venous hypertension, then it will lead to pure right ventricular failure, or we call it a congestive cardiac failure. In presence of respiratory disease, we'll label that as cor pulmonale. So today we'll be talking only on pulmonary hypertension. First, regarding pulmonary arterial hypertension means sustained elevation of pulmonary arterial pressure more than 25 millimeter of mercury at rest, or more than 30 millimeter of mercury at exercise, or on echo Doppler more than 40 millimeter. So at rest 25 millimeter, with exercise 30 millimeter, and on echo if it is more than 40 millimeter, and it has to be sustained elevation of pulmonary arterial pressure, then we call that as pulmonary arterial hypertension. Now if you measure the pressure in a LV, left ventricular end diastolic pressure, by doing a left heart catheterization, or you measure the pressure in a left atrium, or you measure the pressure in pulmonary vein, or we call that as pulmonary wedge pressure, then if it is less than 15 it is normal, but if it increases more than 15, more than 18 we ideally call, then we call that as pulmonary venous hypertension. And secondary to pulmonary venous hypertension you can have an elevation of pulmonary arterial pressure also, that we will be talking in a cor pulmonale, etc. Cor pulmonale chapter, and in case of also we call congestive heart failure. If we use the word only pulmonary hypertension, means it is a general term meaning elevation of pulmonary vascular bed pressure where lesion is not clear, whether it is arterial, whether it is capillary, it is venous. But if that pressure is more than 25 millimeter of mercury, we'll call that as pulmonary hypertension. But by and large, it is taken for granted arterial pressure. So if arterial pressure is elevated, we call pulmonary arterial hypertension. We have already mentioned before, we have given in this particular that if at rest more than 25, during exercise 30, and on echo 40, we'll call that as pulmonary arterial hypertension. And if the pressure on the left side, that is pulmonary vein, or in left atrium, or end diastolic pressure in left ventricle, or capillary wedge pressure, pulmonary venous pressure, wedge pressure, if it is elevated more than 15, ideally we say that more than 18, we'll call that as pulmonary venous hypertension. There is one word called as a idiopathic, meaning diagnosis of idiopathic pulmonary hypertension is by undetermined cause. All the other causes are excluded, then we label that as idiopathic pulmonary hypertension. There is one another term called as a familial pulmonary hypertension, where it is secondary due to mutation of one gene. It is called von morphogenic protein receptor 2 gene. There is a mutation in this gene which is an autosomal dominant, and usually this will be seen in a family. Strong family history will be present. Then that is labeled as familial. Classification wise, you can classify into primary and secondary. Functional classification will be severity wise. There is a WHO classification where there are 5 groups which are separated out. If it is in the arterial, we call as a arterial. If it is on the venous side, we call as a venous. So the common term which are commonly utilized is in these 4 groups. WHO classification is indirectly etiological classification, which is divided into 5 groups. And when you do a lung biopsy, you can divide into histopathological classification. So we'll be giving you a little idea regarding all. Now there are a lot of terms which are being utilized: pulmonary arterial hypertension, sporadic pulmonary, primary pulmonary, familial primary pulmonary, idiopathic primary or idiopathic pulmonary arterial hypertension, primary pulmonary hypertension, also called as PPH, and secondary pulmonary hypertension. These are the few terms which are being commonly utilized in this. We'll be going through some of those so you will understand very clearly. First differentiation, I'll talk of what we call as a WHO so you will understand much better. In WHO there are 5 groups. First we call as a primary pulmonary arterial hypertension, which includes idiopathic as well as familial. We'll be talking in detail further. So it is pure arterial hypertension, so we call as a pulmonary arterial hypertension. Second group is because of venous pressure elevation, so it is called as a pulmonary venous hypertension. So that will fall into these 2 groups, arterial and venous group. So this is arterial, this is venous group. Now pulmonary hypertension secondary to respiratory disease, it is put into a COPD or we call cor pulmonale group. Now here pulmonary arterial pressure is elevated, so it belongs to arterial group. So in arterial group, pulmonary arterial hypertension, COPD will be second group. Third group we call as pulmonary embolism or thromboembolism or chronic thromboembolic pulmonary hypertension. This is also arterial hypertension. So arterial hypertension can be group 1 of WHO, group 3 of WHO and group 4 of WHO. And miscellaneous group also, some of the condition will give rise to arterial hypertension, while venous hypertension is mainly left ventricular failure. So if you divide arterial and venous, 1, 3, 4 and 5 will belong to arterial group, while venous group will be only one, that is group 2. If you divide primary and secondary, 2, 3, 4 and 5 will be secondary, while group 1 will be mainly containing primary groups. But in that also there are some causes which can be secondary. So now we'll be talking of those according to WHO classification. So this is that particular classification we call as arterial hypertension, veno-occlusive hypertension, persistent pulmonary hypertension in newborn. These are the 3 groups which is arterial hypertension. Now in this first group we call as idiopathic or we call idiopathic PAH, pulmonary arterial hypertension, hereditary or we call familial variety, and then when it is associated with this other group, that is 1.4 and 1.3, that is drugs and toxins, connective tissue, HIV, portal hypertension, congenital heart disease, schistosomiasis, it is still put into what we call as a group 1, where we call pulmonary arterial hypertension. So this is classical pulmonary arterial hypertension, and in that this 0.3, 1.3 and 1.4 will be belonging to, because it is secondary due to some disease, then you can put them into secondary groups. While veno-occlusive disease, which can be idiopathic, which can be hereditary due to mutation of some genes, it can be due to drugs and toxins, or maybe with connective tissue, maybe with HIV infection, then it is called veno-occlusive disease. But again in this, it will finally end up with arterial hypertension. And there is one group which is persistent pulmonary hypertension of newborn, that is a separate group. So these are all three which are belonging to pulmonary arterial hypertension. While when it is because of a left heart disease, that is left ventricular dysfunction, systolic or diastolic dysfunction, valvular heart disease like AS, AR, MR, mainly acute AR and acute MR, congenital or acquired left side heart disease, and congenital or acquired pulmonary venous stenosis, those group will produce venous hypertension. That belongs to group 2 of WHO classification. Group 3 is because of secondary due to respiratory disease, we call as a chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, interstitial disease which is a restrictive lung disease, then mixed variety where restrictive and obstructive are together, then obstructive sleep apnea group, alveolar hypoventilation disorders, chronic exposure to high altitude, and developmental lung disease which can be there. These are all groups which will produce cor pulmonale, and that is group 3 of WHO classification. While group 4 is very commonly because of chronic thromboembolic pulmonary hypertension. Short form it is called CTE-PH. So chronic thromboembolic pulmonary hypertension, or it can be because secondary due to pulmonary artery obstruction like angiosarcoma, intravascular tumors, arthritis, congenital pulmonary artery stenosis, or parasites like hydatid cyst. But main important is chronic thromboembolic pulmonary hypertension. That is the main group in this, and that is also going to produce pulmonary arterial hypertension secondarily due to thromboembolic phenomena. So it will go to, if we divide into two groups, arterial and venous, that will be that venous will be plainly group 2 of WHO. Group 3 and 4 will be producing arterial hypertension. And last group we call as a pulmonary hypertension because of unknown etiology like hemolytic anemias, myeloproliferative disorders, after splenectomy, systemic disorders like sarcoidosis, histiocytosis, or metabolic disorders like glycogen storage disease, Gaucher's disease, thyroid disorders, pulmonary tumoral thrombotic microangiopathy. So all these are we call as a miscellaneous group where still the exact pathophysiology is not understood. We call as a pulmonary hypertension with unclear multifactorial mechanism. So WHO is divided into different groups. Now, as far as a functional classification, or we call severity wise is concerned, or clinical ground, it is divided into class 1, class 2, class 3 and class 4. In class 1, the person develops pulmonary hypertension without resulting into any inhibition of physical activity. Already means person is nearly asymptomatic. On ordinary physical activity, person does not develop any fatigue, dyspnea, chest pain or syncope. That is group 1. Group 2 means results into slight limitation in physical activity, meaning person is comfortable at rest, but on ordinary physical activity, he develops little fatigue or may develop little dyspnea, chest pain or syncope. So person on ordinary physical activity results into undue fatigue and dyspnea, but by and large he will not get chest pain, he will not have a syncopal episodes. And group 3, there is a marked limitation in physical activity. Person is comfortable at rest, but on an ordinary physical activity will produce fatigue, dyspnea, chest pain and syncope definitely. While group 4 person is not able to do any physical activity, almost is bedridden. So even at bed rest, he gets symptom signs of right side failure, dyspnea, fatigue, he will have a chest discomfort and even he might have a syncopal episodes. So that is the functional classification of WHO. It is classified into 1, 2, 3 and 4. 1. No limitation to physical activity. 2. Slight limitation to physical activity. 3. Marked limitation to physical activity. And group 4 at bed rest. Also person gets symptoms and signs. So group 1 no symptoms, group 2 slight limitations, group 3 marked symptoms, severe limitations, and group 4 right heart failure, dyspnea, fatigue, syncopal episodes, chest pain, etc. even at rest. Histological classification wise, it is divided into 6 varieties, that is only on microscopic examination or histological examination. Medial hypertrophy group 1, intimal hyperplasia group 2, severe occlusive changes like fibroelastic tissue changes group 3, dilatation and medial thinning occlusion group 4, plexiform lesion group 5 and necrotizing arthritis group 6. According to pulmonary hypertension, it is divided into 3 big groups. Particularly arterial hypertension is divided into 3 groups: idiopathic, familial. Idiopathic is put I in front of PH, here F is put, and when it is associated with other disorders, it is A is put in front. So idiopathic, familial and associated. Associated means associated with collagen disorders, HIV, etc. Depending upon the pressure, it is divided into mild, moderate and severe, and last group we call as a systemic. If pressure is more than 25 at rest and more than 30 after exercise. Now depending upon the pulmonary arterial pressure at rest between 26 to 35, it is called as mild, 36 to 45 moderate, and 40 more than 45 to up to 55 is called severe, and if it is more than 55 it is systemic. If you want to remember very easy way, more than 25 is mild, more than 35 is moderate, more than 45 is moderate, sorry, here more than 25 mild, more than 35 is moderate, more than 45 is severe, and more than 55. So 25, 35, 45 and 55. So that is the thing which is being utilized, mild, moderate and severe variety or systemic. If you take systolic pressure, diastolic pressure and mean pressure, so this is mean pressure. So here there is another way they classify mild, moderate and severe. Mean pulmonary arterial pressure, that is 30, 40, 50 and 60, or we call 25, 35, 45 and 55. So mean pressure wise 30, 40, 50, 60, but when you take an arterial pressure more than 25, more than 35, more than 45 and more than 55. So depending upon that, accordingly you classify, and that is what we call as, usually we measure the diastolic pressure. So it is 25, 35, 45 and 55. If you go for right heart catheterization, then you can use pulmonary arterial pressure, that is mean pressure, capillary pressure, pulmonary wedge pressure you can utilize, and post capillary pressure will be utilized when you use on left side heart catheterization, and depending upon that you can classify. If you are interested, you can go through your at leisure time this is mainly after catheterization. So mean arterial pressure more than 25 is PH, capillary wedge pressure less than 15 will be less likely to be in favor of pulmonary arterial hypertension, and if the vascular resistance is more than 2.5 up to 3, again it is in favor of pulmonary arterial hypertension. So there are three common words which are utilized. Pulmonary hypertension is relatively very common, but when you use the word pulmonary arterial, usually it is not common word which is being utilized. It is relatively uncommon. When blood pressure you measure, it is parallel to systemic. We call it a systemic or aorta pressure. Once in a while you can come across that level. Now we have already mentioned primary, secondary, arterial and venous. By and large the most common which is being utilized is a WHO classification. We have already gone through that. So primary pulmonary hypertension, secondary pulmonary hypertension, we have already told you. WHO wise, group 1 familial and idiopathic will be there, while in secondary it will be group 2, 3, 4, 5. So that will be included in what we call as secondary. Secondary you can divide into arterial and venous. Venous will be group 2 of WHO. We have already shown you that particular slide. And arterial will be group 1, group 3, 4 and 5. So that will be arterial. So group 1 is arterial, which is divided into two, primary and idiopathic. Primary we usually call as a PPH, primary pulmonary hypertension, and idiopathic pulmonary arterial hypertension you can divide into familial, sporadic. Associated conditions is usually labeled as associated pulmonary arterial hypertension, which includes collagen vascular disease, portal hypertension, HIV, drug toxins, etc., or persistent pulmonary hypertension in newborn. While venous hypertension, we already told you it is a left-sided disease like MS, MR, AS, AR, idiopathic hypertrophic subaortic stenosis, that group acute left ventricular failure. So those group will be producing pulmonary venous hypertension. While group 3 is secondary due to respiratory disease like COPD, obstructive sleep apnea, restrictive lung disease which is interstitial lung disease, or mixed picture where you get obstructive plus restrictive hypoventilation syndromes, chronic pneumonias, high altitude sickness, chronic high altitude sickness, etc. will be belonging to group 3. Group 4, chronic thromboembolic disorders, or short form we call as a CTE. So chronic thromboembolic, PH, pulmonary hypertension. And you can include one more in that, sickle cell disease, parasites, particularly we call as hydatid cyst, schistosomiasis, those, or embolic from tumors, foreign body, etc. And in miscellaneous, mainly histiocytosis, mechanical compression of pulmonary vasculature like tumor, foreign bodies, capillary hemangiomas, etc., where exact pathophysiology is still not understood. Sarcoidosis is included in miscellaneous group. If you get here, this is venous side. So this is blood is coming to right atrium, from right atrium to right ventricle. This is superior vena cava, inferior vena cava. When blood from a right ventricle enters into pulmonary artery, and any pathophysiology which is here or in capillary will result into pulmonary arterial hypertension. So disease of pulmonary artery and pulmonary capillary will usually end up with pulmonary arterial hypertension. We call it a group 1. Also group 3, group 4, and some of the group 5. While group 2 will be here, pulmonary venous hypertension, which is secondary due to venous disease or because of left atrium, because of left atrium or left ventricle. this particular three, LV, LA and pulmonary vein will be venous hypertension, and group 1 will be mainly because of this, and pulmonary venous will finally end up with pulmonary arterial hypertension. So these are all the conditions which will produce pulmonary arterial hypertension group 1. This will be group 2, which we call as a venous hypertension. Group 3 and 4 will be involving pulmonary artery and maybe involving pulmonary capillary, while group 5, which may still exactly not understood. So depending upon that same chart now shown with this particular, so anything which involves this pulmonary artery is group 1. Thromboembolic phenomena is also included in that, that is group 4. Group 3 will be lung, which will be producing pulmonary arterial hypertension. So artery, when it gets involved either because of group 1, group 3 and 4, will lead into pulmonary arterial hypertension, while group 2 is because of LV, LA or pulmonary venous system, and group 5 is exactly not understood. So these are the way you try to explain. Very rarely you come across the disease which are associated with pulmonary hypertension, rare disease like diaphragmatic hernia, bronchopulmonary dysplasia, alveolar capillary dysplasia, etc. These are very odd conditions. Drugs and toxins, some of those are very common like cocaine, oral contraceptive pills, estrogen, cigarette smoking, etc. And some of the likely like amphetamine, tryptophan, those particular can produce pulmonary hypertension. Now exact pathophysiology, if you want to go, either it is because of genetic, which is very common in familial hypertension, familial arterial hypertension, or because of infection, or because of toxin, or because of autoimmune disorders. You get an endothelial cell dysfunction. Platelet, endothelial, leukocytes interacts, and they will have either vasoconstrictor property more than vasodilator. So there will imbalance between vasodilator and vasoconstrictor mechanism. More vasoconstriction leading to vasoconstriction and elevation of blood pressure, or because of formation of a growth factor and cytokines imbalance. So there is an increased growth factor as well as cytokines. Smooth muscle remodeling will result into pulmonary arterial vascular resistance increase and pulmonary arterial hypertension, or because of coagulation abnormality, and that leads to thrombosis, and secondary to thrombosis, restriction in a pulmonary vascular bed, resulting into increased pulmonary vascular resistance and pulmonary hypertension. So that will be quite common. This is a very simple diagram showing you how exactly the pulmonary hypertension develops. This I have already shown you. There are different mechanisms which is being shown in a cigarette smoking. There are lot of mechanism, that is antioxidants. So damage by vasoconstriction because of endothelial hypoxia, inflammation because of TNF alpha secondary to cigarette smoking. Oxidants also leads to proliferation of vascular cells because of growth factor and endothelin, and that will also produce arterial changes. So oxidants will produce vasoconstriction, inflammation and proliferation of vascular bed. Vascular compression will reduce airflow and there will be airflow obstruction. Oxidant in cigarette smoke like nitric oxide and prostacyclin will also produce anti-proliferation and apoptosis. So it will inhibit these nitric oxides, which will be vasodilator. So by inhibiting that vasodilatation will produce more of vasoconstriction. So there is an imbalance between vasodilatation and vasoconstriction. So these two compounds will produce vasodilatation. So oxidant will inhibit this and stimulate endothelin, and hypoxia will be also stimulated. So that is an imbalance between these two. So these are all the factors which will be there. So vascular injury, risk factors will be present. There is an increased susceptibility because of a genetic factors, and there is a nitric oxide synthesis reduction, prostacyclin reduction. There is an increased production of endothelin. All that will produce vascular changes, and there will be gradual remodeling of the arteries, leading to hypertrophy and occlusion and vasoconstriction. So it is by endothelin pathway, prostacyclin pathway, or nitric oxide pathway. It results into vasoconstriction and proliferation. As far as prostacyclin is concerned, it results into vasodilatation and anti-proliferation. And nitric oxide pathway will result into vasodilatation and anti-proliferation. So these two pathways are protective, which are inhibited by oxidants and insults, while endothelin pathway, which is stimulated by smoking and oxidants, which will produce vasoconstriction and proliferation, and inhibiting these two pathways, it will further lead to vasoconstriction and proliferation. So proliferation, thrombosis and vasoconstriction is the prime, and that will end up with a vascular remodeling. Also inflammation will lead to vascular remodeling. That is called as a two-hit hypothesis because of a modified gene, or we call gene mutation, or because of environmental factors. There is endothelin which is increased, prostacyclin factor is reduced, ACE inhibitors, angiotensin 2 is increased, fibrinolysis is affected. There are also other factors which are being affected, like serine elastase, serotonin transporter and serotonin uptake is increased, nitric oxide is reduced, growth factor is increased. All these factors together will lead to vascular bed remodeling and vasoconstriction, and finally will produce primary pulmonary hypertension. So there are two factors which are working, one which is stimulator, which stimulates constriction, and one which inhibits dilatation. So growth factors, oxidant stress, inflammations, serotonin, endothelin, angiopoietin, thromboxane A2, these are all multiple factors which will stimulate vasoconstriction and growth and occlusion of the artery, while inhibitors, which will produce dilatation and decreases proliferation, that is prostacyclin, mainly to prostacyclin and nitric oxides, and increase fibrinolysis, while here inflammation, oxidative states, growth factor, endothelin, serotonin, etc. There are multiple factors, and there is an imbalance between two. This is reduced and this is increased, and that produces disruption. So it is called two-hit hypothesis. One because of genetic mutation, and one because of vascular remodeling. So normal blood vessels will go into vascular remodeling, and this is two-hit hypothesis. First hit because of genetic factor, there is a vascular remodeling, and second hit because of environmental factors and somatic mutations result into vascular remodeling is called second hit. This is genetic hit, or we call primary, and depending upon that they use the word two-hit hypothesis. Once a person develops a primary pulmonary hypertension, dyspnea is present in 95% of the people, chest pain is present in 50 to 75% of the people, and syncope is present in only 25 to 35%. But chronic fatigue is very commonly present in 60 to 75%. So dyspnea, chest pain, fatigue and syncope becomes the prime symptoms in case of primary pulmonary hypertension. If person is having some condition like thromboembolic phenomena, person can present as an hemoptysis. Person can have a symptom signs of cor pulmonale, very common. in a person with group 3. And whenever a person gets a right heart failure, he will have a P2 loud, right ventricular heave, S3 sound, and because of enlargement of the atrium, person can have a compression of recurrent laryngeal nerve and can produce hoarseness of voice, we call as a Ortner syndrome. Person can have a palpitation, and secondary to right ventricular failure can have edema, JVP elevated, hepatosplenomegaly. So right ventricular heave, JVP, edema, hepatosplenomegaly will give you that person is going into right ventricular failure, which is seen very commonly in group 3, 4, and also quite frequently seen in secondary due to group 2 also. We call pulmonary venous pressure elevation. And in late stages of group 1 also, you will see those right ventricular failure signs. So JVP elevation, loud second heart sound, right ventricular heave, murmur of TR, S3 gallop suggest advanced right ventricular failure. But in a case of primary pulmonary hypertension, lungs will be clear. While in case of group 2, you will have a basal crackles and left ventricular hypertrophy, quite common. In group 3, WHO classification wise, in that you will have a basic respiratory disease like chronic bronchitis, emphysema, etc. So in those group, that is group 2, 3, you will have some respiratory findings. And in group 4 also, you can have a respiratory findings. Group 5 plus minus. So that will be the respiratory findings. We have already told you dyspnea is most common, fatigue is second common, chest pain is third, and fourth is syncope. So these four are the most common signs. And once the person develops a right ventricular failure, you will have a edema, palpitation, hepatosplenomegaly, JVP elevated, etc. So the most common symptom is dyspnea, chest pain, that is angina, syncope, and we call fatigue. This will be the common symptoms. And once a person develops a right side failure, then you will have all those symptom signs like right ventricular heave, tricuspid regurgitation murmur, S3 sounds, JVP elevated, hepatosplenomegaly, ascites, edema, etc. So all those, whatever we have discussed here. Orthopnea, PND will be very common in venous hypertension, will not be seen in group 3 and group 4. Also in group 1 also it will not be seen. So depending upon the group, certain symptom signs will not be common. So orthopnea, paroxysmal nocturnal dyspnea, basal crackles, central cyanosis, etc. will be more common in group 2. Clubbing will be seen more commonly in group 3. Hepatojugular reflux will be seen loud pulmonary second heart sound, S3, hepatosplenomegaly, edema, etc. will be seen if a person develops congestive heart failure, either in group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4, any one of those. So those particular signs will be seen. Again, these are described. Raynaud's phenomena will be very common in a person with collagen disorders. It is more commonly seen in those particular group. Also, it may be seen in a primary pulmonary hypertension. So just go through at your leisure time. These are all the signs what we have mentioned before. So telangiectasia, calcinosis, Raynaud's phenomena will be more commonly seen with collagen disorders group. JVP elevated, right heave, TR murmur, loud P2, edema, etc. will be more commonly seen in a person with a right ventricular failure, which is more common with group 1, group 3, group 4. But in group 2, LVF sign plus right ventricular failure signs. So reason to suspect, if any person who comes to you with a unexplained dyspnea, There is Raynaud's phenomena. You got CREST, C for calcinosis, R for Raynaud's, E for esophageal motility, S for uh, I think syndactyly, and telangiectasia. So if you get that, you call that as a CREST syndrome. Or if there is a HIV, sickle cell, obstructive sleep apnea, strong family history, etc. All those will give you possibility of pulmonary arterial hypertension. You can use stimulant test, or even after giving a good oxygen, if the pulmonary hypertension is reduced, it is because of, by and large, because of a left side heart failure, venous hypertension, rather than arterial hypertension. And if you stimulate, give CCB, and if there is a fall of pulmonary arterial pressure, it is in favor of more in case of pulmonary arterial hypertension. So depending upon, this is classification according to your functional wise. So how much person has got limitation in physical activity, you classify into class 1, class 2, class 3 and 4. We have told you no limitations of physical activity, class 1, slight limitation, class 2, marked limitation, class 3, and at rest you get symptom signs of right side heart failure plus all the symptoms like dyspnea, fatigue, chest pain, syncopal episodes, etc. You will label that as class 4. You can put them into different risk group, low risk, intermediate risk and high risk, by looking at clinical evidence of right ventricular failure, progress, how it is progressing, WHO classification, 6-minute walking test, BNP. BNP will be elevated in high risk group, BNP will be mildly elevated, group 2 and 3 will be more commonly having a low risk, while group 4, that is what we call as a chronic thromboembolic phenomena, will be mainly group 4. So that will be at a high risk. Echocardiography, mild RV dysfunction in lower risk, severe RV dysfunction will be in a high risk group. Hemodynamic wise, if there is a very high right atrial pressure, then it is more in favor of a high risk group. Near normal right atrial pressure will be more in favor of a low risk group. So you can utilize this particular chart for differentiating a low risk group and a high risk group, because in high risk group you will require a separate line of treatment. These are the different apps which are available, which you can fill in and you can get your, whether it is a high risk group or a low risk group. You can download that in your mobile and you can get that particular score. These are different scores which are being there, and you can sum up that and identify if it is more than 6, it is definitely high risk group. So this is risk calculation, different material. Now once you have got this, now how you approach? By and large, the most important test which helps you to differentiate lot of condition is echocardiography. So if you do a echocardiography and echocardiography shows pulmonary wedge pressure is more than 18, straightforward it is a venous hypertension. Or if there is a clinical evidence of valvular heart disease like MS-MR, AS-AR, but more of MR and AR, left ventricular hypertrophy, left ventricular dilatation, left ventricular and diastolic pressure is elevated, and pulmonary capillary wedge pressure or pulmonary venous pressure or left atrial pressure is elevated, it is straightforward in favor of a left heart disease. Or if there is a clinical evidence by echocardiography showing you a coronary artery disease like hypokinesia, hyperkinesia, etc., that also goes in favor of left heart disease. If you do echo and find out that there is a congenital heart disease which is going to have right to left shunt, they will be more prone to have left side disease. And if there is an evidence of right atrial enlargement, right ventricular enlargement, pure right ventricular enlargement and pure right atrial enlargement, it will be more in favor of what we call as right ventricular pathophysiology. Secondary due to either because of artery like primary pulmonary hypertension or idiopathic pulmonary arterial hypertension, familial pulmonary arterial hypertension, that group, or maybe group 3 and group 4, that is corpulmonal group, and chronic pulmonary thromboembolic pulmonary hypertension, chronic thromboembolic pulmonary hypertension. Now, while ruling out group 3, chest X-ray, PFT, chest CT will be helpful to rule out. Obstructive, restrictive, you can add even DLCO test, etc. to find out obstructive, restrictive and mixed group of disorders. And if you want to identify what we call as a group 4, then you will have to go for VQ scan and pulmonary angiography combined with CT or MRI. That you can identify. If you want to identify obstructive sleep apnea, you will have to do what we call as a polysomnography. If you want to identify the odd groups, that is pulmonary arterial hypertension associated conditions like HIV or group 5 scleroderma, you will go for some of the serological studies. You want to identify collagen disorders, you will do RA test, anti-CCP, etc. Mixed connective tissue disorders, you will again go for those serological studies. In HIV also you will go for, we call as a HIV test. If you want to rule out portopulmonary hypertension, you will do liver function test, abdominal ultrasound. That will help you to identify cirrhosis and portal hypertension. And you want to rule out what we call as a primary pulmonary arterial hypertension, you will do right heart catheterization, which will give you much better idea regarding a pulmonary arterial hypertension, etc. So this is the way you approach in a person who has developed a pulmonary hypertension, maybe arterial, maybe venous. So these are non-invasive techniques which can be there in a pulmonary hypertension. In group 2, how you approach. In group 3, how you approach. In group 2 and 3, how you approach. That is being given. So VQ scan will be useful in identifying group 4 more, that is thromboembolic phenomena, pulmonary embolism, etc. While group 2, which is venous, where you will do more of ECG, chest X-ray, echocardiography, transthoracic echo, or we call transesophageal echo, etc. And if you want to identify group 3, ECG may not be helpful, but echo will be helpful to rule out other conditions, that is group 2 conditions. Chest X-ray, lung function test, HRCT, DLCO will be helpful to rule out group 3 groups, whether obstructive or restrictive groups. So that will be the way where you approach. We call non-invasive technique. Very rarely we require an invasive technique like bronchoscopy, lung biopsy in group 3. In case of group 2, angiography, CT angio, etc. That is in group 2. In group 4, pulmonary angiography with CT MRI, that is CT pulmonary angio or MRI pulmonary angio, etc. will be done in group 4. So this is what we call in a group 4. You can go for different studies. All those studies names are given, and these are the different diseases what are being given, what are the tests you do. So these are the charts which are being there. At your leisure time you can go through that. I've already uttered majority of the things. This is algorithm for pulmonary hypertension in general. How you identify by symptom signs, and history if it is suggestive of pulmonary hypertension. First study is echocardiography, which will help you to differentiate group 2, 3, 4 very easily. So it will be able to, you will be able to differentiate between group 2, group 3 and even group 1. And then you go for further investigation like ECG, pulmonary function test, DLCO, HRCT, etc. to rule out group 3, which is core pulmonal group. And for ruling out group 2, mainly ECG, echo will be an X-ray chest say. Those three investigation will be more than enough. And for group 4, we'll go for VQ scan and pulmonary angiography. This is for group 4. This is that what I've shown you a slide before. The commonest first test is history, examination, chest X-ray and ECG, followed by echo. Echo, you can have a transesophageal echo or transthoracic echo, which will help to rule out three groups of disorders: left heart disease, congenital heart disease, valvular heart disease, and even it will give you idea regarding a first group, which will have a pure right ventricular enlargement, right atrial enlargement, increase in right ventricular systolic pressure, right ventricular function will be abnormal. VQ scan will be very helpful along with pulmonary angiography, CT angio and coagulative studies for chronic pulmonary embolism. Pulmonary function test and ABG will be useful to rule out mainly group 3, which is core pulmonal group. If you want to rule out obstructive sleep apnea, you can go for polysomnography, which we have already shown you on previous slides. For collagen tissue disorders, HIV, ANA, liver function test, etc. to rule out those particular group like HIV infection, scleroderma, SLE, rheumatoid arthritis, portopulmonary hypertension, all those groups. In portopulmonary hypertension, LFT. For scleroderma, SLE, RA, ANA, anti-nuclear antibody, anti-CCP, RA test, etc. to rule out scleroderma, SLE, rheumatoid arthritis, and to rule out HIV infection, HIV test. Basically, if you want to find out the function, 6-minute walking test is very helpful, and that will be helpful for baseline and also for prognosis purpose. For right heart catheterization, and then you can do the vasodilator test. You can do exercise pulmonary right heart catheterization. You can do volume loading test. You can do left heart catheterization test and confirm diagnosis of pulmonary hypertension. You can have a hemodynamic profile, and you can also find out the pulmonary vasodilator response, which will be helping you to decide what type of treatment you can go for. So these are all permutation, combination, multiple. This is a good chart. This you can utilize very nicely for a person in whom you suspect pulmonary arterial hypertension. This is the base chart in 2 parts. This is another chart you can go through. Same thing presented in a different pattern. This is again a similar way. In a suspected case of pulmonary hypertension, how you approach. This is how you utilize echocardiography in patients suspected with pulmonary hypertension, and then how you go that in a dilated RV you can go for pulmonary function test, differentiate obstructive and restrictive. If it is restrictive, go for HRCT. If it is obstructive, you can go for DLCO test. Then if it is in HRCT, infiltrative lung disease, or whether it is pulmonary thromboembolism or it is a enlarged pulmonary artery, you can go for CBC, ANA, HIV, thyroid function test, liver function test, etc. And then you can go for finding out further exercise testing, 6-minute walking test, pulmonary catheterization, right heart study, effect of vasodilator, etc. And if you are suspecting left heart disease, you can go for left side cardiac catheterization and study. So all what we have discussed before is mentioned here. So these are all the different investigative findings you can go for. These are the first initial investigative finding what you can do in a pulmonary hypertension. These are the importance of each: chest X-ray, echo, pulmonary function test, lung perfusion scan, or we call as a VQ scan, CT scan, echocardiography, contrast study, contrast echo, Doppler echo, exercise testing, etc. BNP can be utilized to differentiate between what we call as a congestive heart failure, that is right side failure. If BNP is elevated, it is in favor of a right ventricular dysfunction. So you can utilize that. 6-minute walking test, cardiopulmonary exercise test is also useful. Right heart catheterization is very helpful. We already discussed all this part, so I'm skipping over. This is a typical X-ray which you see in a pulmonary hypertension. You see uh, left atrial enlargement, double atrial shadow you can see. You can have a little RV, mild cardiomegaly. So increased size of a pulmonary artery, right ventricular hypertrophy, by and large clear lung suggest primary pulmonary hypertension. So you can have a prominent pulmonary artery, right side descending pulmonary artery is also prominent. RV enlargement is useful to confirm there is a right ventricular hypertrophy. Echocardiography will give you much better idea and differentiate between venous and arterial very clearly. Further, it can be helped by right heart and left heart catheterizations. ECG will also help you to differentiate RVH, RAE from LVH, LAE, ischemic heart disease, etc. So those finding will be also helpful. In a pure right side disorders, particularly group 3, group 4, you will have a RVH, P pulmonale, tachycardia, etc. This is very characteristic, showing you RVH and P pulmonale. Right heart catheterization is a gold mark, gold standard. 6-minute walking test is useful very frequently to differentiate different groups, functional groups, that is group 1, group 2, group 3 and group 4. I've already mentioned regarding a right heart catheterization, left heart catheterization. Vasodilator test is useful because when you give a vasodilator and if there is a fall of blood pressure of at least 10 millimeter and if the value becomes less than 40, together with cardiac output changes, it is positive for acute vasodilator response, and this is very helpful in treatment, particularly calcium channel blocker. So all those are being utilized. You can go for right heart catheter. This is the typical we call Swan-Ganz catheter is being utilized. CT chest, pulmonary arteriography, that is useful for arterial disease, polysomnography for OSA. Transesophageal echo is very useful for identifying RV, LV, etc. Cardiopulmonary exercise test will be also useful to identify how severe the cardiopulmonary function is being affected. You can go for a PET scan also. You can go for VQ scan, PFT, ABG, perfusion scan, high resolution CT scan, immunological studies, etc. And you will have to put them into different groups. Mainly WHO groups and functional group is very important. Histological study is very rarely being done by doing a lung biopsy. Very rarely done. Management will depend upon the treatment of underlying cause, treatment of pulmonary hypertension, and treatment of congestive cardiac failure. And for that, we divide the general measures, medical treatment, and surgical treatment. In medical treatment, diuretics, coumadin, that is anticoagulants, oxygen, digoxin, and treatment of pulmonary arterial hypertension is the mainstay in medical treatment. As far as surgical treatment is concerned, in a late stage, atrial septotomy and lung transplant becomes the end stage disorders treatment. So management will depend upon the medical, that is digoxin, diuretics, oxygen, anticoagulants, vasodilators. In vasodilators, CCB, prostacyclin, PDE inhibitors, endothelin receptor blockers, etc. And in late stage atrial septotomy, heart lung transplant or only lung transplant, depending upon what it is. So in a non-pharmacological therapy, you can utilize in a case of a pulmonary thromboembolism, that is endarterectomy or balloon pulmonary angioplasty. Atrial septotomy, lung transplant, heart lung transplant is rarely being done, and it is done in a end stage when your drug therapy fails. Pulmonary artery denervation is recently being tried. Radiofrequency ablations catheter is being utilized to reduce pulmonary hypertension. These are all the treatment. And depending upon the stage A, stage B, stage C, low risk, high risk, these are all the treatment which are being advised. Usually in stage A, treatment of sleep apnea, obesity, etc. should be done. In stage B, calcium channel blocker. In a low risk group, you can use what we call as a PDE inhibitors, sodium restriction, diuretics, digoxin, aldactone, etc. is being utilized. Once a person reaches to a high risk groups, now IV medications are being given. Then you can go for a combination therapy and you can use multi-drug therapy. And in a refractory case, when all this treatment fails, now he needs inotropes and he might have to undergo atrial septotomy, lung transplant or heart lung transplant. And nowadays they also try what we call as a pulmonary artery denervation by radiofrequency ablations. This is a guideline which was given in 2007. You can go through this guideline depending upon the different functional classification. This is class 2, class 3, class 4. What are the treatment being advised? This is usually in a class 1 advice. This is same thing given in class 2, 3 and 4. What are the treatment being advised in class 2, 3 and 4? What do you do? This is initially when you detect pulmonary hypertension, what you do. You can utilize anticoagulation, diuretic, oxygen, digoxin, etc. Then you can add oral contraceptive pill, oral CCB, sorry, not contraceptive pills. You will have to stop contraceptive pills. And if the person has got a very high risk group, you might have to give IV, PDE inhibitors, endothelin receptor agonist, etc. These are all the treatment you can give. And in a end stage, you can go for atrial septostomy, lung transplant, heart lung transplant, or even nowadays you can go for a pulmonary artery denervation by radiofrequency ablation. So same thing, whatever we have given is given in a separate slides. What you do in a early stage, what you do in a late stage, that is stage 2, stage 3 and stage 4. These are general measures what you do. These are supportive measure line of treatment. Atrial septotomy, you create a hole by using a catheter, balloon catheter, and you create a what we call as a enlarges the foramen oval by using a balloon catheter, and you create an artificial ASD. Or you can also go for Pott shunt. Pott shunt is a shunt which is created between left pulmonary artery and atrium, or you can create between right pulmonary artery and aorta. This is between aorta and pulmonary artery. This is called Pott shunt. So you create an anastomosis between pulmonary artery and descending aorta or ascending aorta. You call as a Pott shunt. So that can be created. But there is always one problem. While creating this, Pott shunt has got little advantage over septostomy, because in septostomy what is being done is deoxygenated blood is going from right side to the left side. So deoxygenated blood will be circulating in brain as well as coronary, while in this the chance of that will be reduced. So in a setting of suprasystemic pulmonary arterial hypertension, theoretical advantage is there of Pott shunt over septostomy. Pulmonary arterial denervation has got some advantage, but not 100% proven. Lung transplant is a final answer, but there is always a failure of medical therapy. Whenever there is a failure of medical therapy, you have to go for a lung transplant. There are some indications and there are some contraindications. This is all those what we have mentioned. And if a person develops a right ventricular failure, again this is what we call as a in stage 2 or stage B and C. You will have to go for ACE inhibitor, beta blockers, and then you add digoxin and diuretics in stage C, and in stage D, inotropes followed by ventricular assisted device, and you will have to go for heart lung transplant. So this is one chart for chronic thromboembolic pulmonary hypertension. This is the second part of that chronic thromboembolic pulmonary hypertension. As far as complication is concerned, in a variety of WHO classification, group 3, cor pulmonale is very common, cardiac arrhythmias are very common, and in group 4, chances of hemoptysis is very high. Also in case of group 2, person can have blood stain frothy sputum, and invariably primary pulmonary hypertension is a progressive disease and person will succumb to death. So I hope this is helpful. This is a take home message. At your leisure time you can go through, and this is a future where they are trying to find out other molecules which can be very helpful in case of pulmonary hypertension for management, and they are trying even gene therapy, etc. But how much a future will tell us. I end my lecture on a pulmonary hypertension. You will come across good number of times this particular group. Always try to differentiate between venous, arterial and primary pulmonary arterial hypertension. It will be very useful to you for deciding the treatment part. So I end my lecture here. We see you in some other lecture next time.